Housing Medford, Housing Nantucket, Lawrence Community Works, Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations, or MACDC, Metro Housing Boston, Metro West Collaborative Development, NeighborWorks Housing Solutions, New England Rural Health Association, New View Communities, Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, North Shore CDC, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, RCAP Solutions, Regional Housing Services Office, and Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council. If you didn't hear your organization's name on here, please do not fret. We are so happy to have you here today. You could be a co-sponsor next year, and we welcome you in all of the work that we do. Our regional meetings are very important to our work. CHAPA is a statewide affordable housing organization that encourages the production and preservation of homes that are affordable to people with low and moderate incomes. And we work to foster diverse and sustainable communities, and where through planning and community development where everybody can thrive. For more than 50 years, we have been advocating for opportunity at the local, state, and federal levels. We've been expanding access to housing through our coordination of the Massachusetts Homeownership Collaborative, monitoring thousands of affordable homes across the state, and administering the new-ish, it's a little bit more than a year old now, My Mass Home Homeownership website. And we work to develop the affordable housing field through trainings and forums and the mentorship program that we run with the Mel King Institute. CHAPA brings together a very broad group of stakeholders that represent nonprofit and for-profit developers, housing authorities, tenants, legal services, real estate attorneys, financial institutions, municipal officials, planners, homelessness advocacy organizations, disability advocates, service providers, community-based organizations, and more. And it's so important because when we bring such a broad group of people together, we can really understand the challenges that people are facing and our state is facing and work for solutions that will have a real impact. Together, we are making so much progress. Just yesterday, Governor Healy signed into law an expansion of the state low-income housing tax credit, making it permanent. It was actually a program that sunsetted and we needed to advocate for every 5 years. This program was just increased by $20 million, so $60 million per year. And this will result in 600 to 900 more homes being created or preserved. And with this is under our current housing programs, with a new housing bond bill expected to be filed soon and more ability to finance the production and preservation of affordable homes, the state low-income housing tax credit can do even more. Together, we have worked to expand the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, a program that had dwindled down to $24 million, is now almost $200 million per year. We have expanded the Alternative Housing Voucher Program. This program used to serve a very small group of people and is now growing so that it can be project-based. And this means that we can create affordable, accessible homes rather than only leaving it to a person that has a voucher to find a home that might be available that they can use the voucher for. Together, we have increased funding for public housing so that we can preserve this very precious resource in these vibrant communities where our neighbors live.
No, I can't hear at all.
Is everybody okay? Can you hear? Okay, hopefully you can all hear. We are really accomplishing so much together, and now is the moment for housing. And we know that together, the people here, the people that we're working with in our communities, we can build a better future for everyone in the Commonwealth. This is something that we have always done in Massachusetts. We have always been a state that shapes the future that we want for ourselves. And the affordable housing challenges that are facing our state put us at risk of losing the very things that make the Commonwealth so great. The decisions that we are making now, that we are making in our communities every day and at the state level, will determine our future and can ensure that everyone can find an affordable home in the community that they choose. Today's meeting helps us all get a better understanding of what's happening in our different regions and learning about the innovative things that people are doing right now to expand affordable housing. This round of regional meetings is more important than ever as we face unprecedented need for shelter, and for deeply affordable housing as we strive to close the racial homeownership gap and as we work to diversify our housing stock so that we are actually meeting the needs that people have, that our communities have, and the Commonwealth has. So today's meeting, we're doing a lot of talking right now, but this is really going to be an exchange. We will share updates on what we're working on, and we really want to hear from you. How can we work together to ensure that everyone has that safe, healthy, affordable home in any community they choose? How can we develop a housing agenda that centers people, that centers affordability, equity, accessibility, and sustainability? In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Whitney Demetrius, CHAPA's Director of Fair Housing and Municipal Engagement. Whitney will give us a run through of the agenda today. Before I turn it over to her, though, I'd really like for everybody to give her a round of applause with your little reaction button, because Whitney and her team have put so much work into this event to ensure that we have an interactive meeting that gives you meaningful opportunity to provide feedback and to offer your ideas for solutions. I also want to take a quick moment to introduce Matt Noyce, CHAPA's new Director of Public Policy. He started just a little more than a month ago and has really dived in, and you'll be hearing more from him today. I want to again thank Whitney, the entire municipal engagement team, our policy team, and the whole CHAPA staff. This really has been a big team effort, and we're just so excited to have you here today. Whitney, I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and everyone here. Honestly, this has been a team effort. This is a team effort. And so we're really excited to have so many of you join us this morning. So my kudos is really to the policy team, both Matt and Ivy, and the MEI team with Monica and Lily. Please, if you do anything, you should applaud all of them as well in this work, and the entire staff at CHAPA. This is a collaborative effort, and our goal, as Rachel mentioned, to bring everyone together at once, see where our shared sort of policy agendas and needs and assessments and are together, and also be able to do some regional work. So what we'll do today in our agenda, we'll go over our policy and budget updates. Fair housing will uplift some of what we've been working on, as well as with our in our municipal engagement initiative program. We'll hear from Monica, and then the MBTA communities update. What on earth we've been up to with that work? Lily has been sort of very active in communities across the state. That are MBTA communities. And then we will break out into our regional breakout groups to be able to share together within regions what we are grappling with, and then we'll come back together. We'll do utilize Poll Everywhere to hear from folks, as well as another way. So if that 35 minutes you're unable to get your points in or things you might want to share, you'll be able to do that in the poll. So we'll do a report back and what some of the aha moments are, and then be able to share with you some upcoming events and shared opportunities as well. But let's take a pause, take a moment to find out who all is in the room. You'll note at the on the screen, if you go to
I
poll
think we lost her for a second. I'll step in. So we're going to start by getting a little sense of who is in the space using one of our favorite tools, pollev.com. Sorry, Whitney, you froze, so I just started talking on your behalf.
Great.
So if folks could open up whatever your chosen web browser is and go to pollev.com/mkeel003. That is Monica Keel. So go to your web browser, type in pollev.com/mkeel. That's MKEEL.
And you should also be able to click straight from the link that we shared in the chat. If you click directly in the browser, the link that I shared, it should take you straight there. We want to get a sense of thank you, Lily, for jumping right in. Didn't I tell you a team effort? I told you it was that, and I meant it. So Monica will share her screen so that we can get a sense of who all is in the room. And if you are doing statewide work, we account to the fact that you will probably not be able to do it in that way. So we're asking where you live or where you work. Feel free to account for it in that way. And so, yes, as Rachel mentioned, teamwork makes the dream work. Excited to see all of the teamwork that we are doing across the state and all of the coverage we have here. And I want to uplift that we see folks outside of the box here, outside of Massachusetts, who are joining us as well. And so, as you can see, we have some regional coverage here with folks coming from various municipalities, cities, and towns. I want to acknowledge it may be hard to read on the map, but you guys are getting the picture here and helping us get a sense of who is in the room in terms of our work and where and where we live. So we welcome you. We welcome you. We see so many of you all from all over across the state, and our co-sponsors have really helped us to make sure that we were capturing a wide range of folks as well. So let's find out which you represent. So on the next poll, the second poll, Monica will sort of start off. We want to get a sense of how you come to the space. Are you an advocate? Are you a legislator? Are you a resident, a strong resident and activist in the work? Just want to get a sense of who all is joining us as well. So in addition to where you live and work, that same link should work for you to be able to answer that question. Awesome. Excuse me. And so I noticed we have a lot of folks, municipal staff and elected officials. We welcome you. And certainly we want to make sure we acknowledge our elected officials if we're able. So please direct message either myself, Abi, Matt, or Rachel, so we can acknowledge you as well and apologize if we're missing anyone. But we see many housing advocates. Love to see that. Local housing advocates on the call as well. Many nonprofit staff who are partners in this work, housing technical assistance providers, and some that are outside of that category. And so we welcome you all as well and joining us today. So we see where our pockets are, where we need to do some more work to get folks in the space, but certainly excited to see the wide range of folks who join us today. And I see someone from Saugus who I need to connect with because I live in Saugus. So if someone needs Jim, please email me. And welcome Jim Toza from the Saugus Housing Board. Welcome, welcome everyone into the space. So we'll stop sharing now, and what I'd love to do is, as Rachel sort of introduced and welcomed Matt Noyes, who's Director of Public Policy here, as well as Abi Curry. She is the Deputy Director now of Public Policy. Just want to allow us to go through and share what we have been up to, what we are working on, and I'll turn it over to you all.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much. Rachel, thank you for that very kind introduction. As Rachel said, I am the new guy at CHAPA, so some of you may have seen my name on the agenda or on the staff list, wondered who I was. Some of you also might be looking at that and wondering if the weatherman from NECN made a career change. And no, I'm not in fact him. I have never met him, but I'm told he's taller than me. So it's such a pleasure to be here. I've been a long admirer of CHAPA, and I'm just overjoyed to be part of the team here. So we'll start with the policy piece. I'm going to go through a few of these slides and talk about broad pieces for CHAPA's policy, and then Abi will talk about some of the very specific budget and legislative pieces as well. Lily, I think you're controlling the slide deck, so thank you so much for that. So CHAPA has a vision for Massachusetts, and the vision is to create a really strong housing ecosystem that will allow the Commonwealth to thrive and all of our neighborhoods to thrive. And you've probably seen this number before of 200,000 new units by 2030, and that is a really important number. But we also want to call your attention to the math at the bottom of the page. It's not 200,000 homes overall that we're focused on, it's also how those break down. And so if you see at the bottom, it's 40,000 affordable homes, 20,000 deeply affordable homes. And among those 20,000 are a significant number of supportive units, and then 140,000 market rate homes as well. So I think that's really important for us to be looking at. And that helps really inform where we're going with some of the policy buckets that we'll see on the next slide. We have these 4 policy areas, the 4 Ps that we're looking at. And we'll go into each one of them more specifically, but we start with people, people first. Rachel talked about putting people at the center. Production, development of new homes, planning, looking at the framework, looking at the infrastructure around the state, the planning framework, and also preserving our units so that we have affordable units and we're not backsliding. We're keeping what we've got, keeping them in good condition, and also making sure that they're modernized and up to date. So for people, first and foremost, as I flip through my notes frantically here, I need to get better technology here rather than handwritten notes, but I will do my best here. With people, I think it's really important that we recognize that there are systemic barriers that existed that have historic origins. Racism, poverty have resulted in barriers that mean that there's an inequitable access to housing. We need to confront those systemic issues and implement policies that not only rectify them, but we create a more equitable state and overall. So the first thing we have is to put people at the top, and we want policies that are going to benefit people, recognize the barriers, the inequities that exist, and put them into place. So these are things like closing the home ownership gap, making home buyer counseling and education into place, first-time home buyer assistance, all these things that you see here. Abhi will talk about some of the very specific legislation in here. Number 2 is production. It's not enough to build housing for the sake of building housing. We have to produce affordable homes, and that requires a significant investment. Rachel alluded earlier to a victory that we had this week, well, last week and this week, in the passage of the tax relief bill that the governor signed into law yesterday. That included significant new funding for LIHTC, which is a very important tool that allows for the production of more affordable units. So when we look at our production goals and our production area, we want to increase funding to build more affordable homes. We want to look at vouchers because vouchers are a very important tool that will allow developments to be affordable for people. We want to prioritize funding for affordable housing. We want to create supportive housing because housing in and of itself is not enough in every case. We need to provide services as well so that people who are facing the most significant challenges at the very lowest income levels are able to have permanent housing. And we need to look at new revenue sources to create that housing and put it into place. We will talk about some of the legislation that we have proposed in the State House that will provide new tools and new revenue sources. Number 3 is the planning. Housing doesn't happen on its own, it's part of a plan, and we need to deliberately work to establish a framework where affordable housing is possible. We need to have statewide production goals. We talked about that 200,000 and how that 200,000 breaks down. We need to have certain levels of affordability that we're looking to hit. When it comes to multifamily zoning and MBT communities, we saw significant victory in the passage of the so-called Chapter 3A that allowed for or mandated multifamily housing in MBTA communities. And now we have the opportunity now to make sure that that's implemented effectively. I'm going to look at ADUs and other types of housing to increase the stock in ways that we haven't been able to do before. And we also have a defensive and sort of offensive is how I look at this. We want to protect against exclusionary zoning initiatives. That's our defensive, and also offensive, encourage communities to create inclusive zonings at the same time. And housing is not always the most straightforward. Zoning is not always the most straightforward process to look at. So we want to provide technical assistance for communities to help them create these and help us create the future that we want in the state. And then bucket number 4 is preservation. Community is created when people establish roots in a place, and that's how we make it a home. We want a place where seniors can stay, families can stay, people can grow up and afford to live in those communities where they grew up. We want to keep affordable homes affordable so we don't lose ground in the development end. So to that end, we want to make sure that we're focusing on preservation at the same time. Want to make sure that there's tools in place, a safety net, so that if something happens to an individual, into a family, that doesn't necessarily result in them losing their home. We want to have more emergency rental and mortgage assistance, deep energy retrofits to make sure that affordable housing is energy efficient and that it meets all the modern standards. And we want to make sure that the homes in the public and affordable homes are healthy to remediate hazards like lead paint, mold, and asbestos. And Abi will now take it from here and talk about some of the very specific legislative initiatives.
Thank you so much, Matt. And with all of this that we are trying to do, I think just talking about our legislative agenda that we want to make sure that we are pushing in this session, there is a whole lot of items we have on our list. I am not going to go through each one of them, but I also want to highlight not all of this is something that CHAPA is leading on. Many of these are led by other organizations, and we really want to acknowledge that as well. We collaborate with so many other organizations. Many of these are things that we are leading on, but many of these are things that we are supportive of to make sure that we are covering all of this, and we are trying to push forward agenda that will help our housing ecosystem. And it's not just about production, but as we are looking at increasing production, we are also making sure that people who need assistance right now are helped through all of these policies. And so this is just a whole list. I'll be touching upon a few of those as I go through specific legislation and the resources of how we make that policy happen and how we make sure there is enough funding for those policies to be implemented. So going forward, these are sort of our top priorities for legislation. Making bold investments through a housing bond bill. A housing bond bill is essentially what authorizes allocation for things like affordable housing trust fund on the statewide level, the home modification loan program, capital improvement and preservation fund, housing stabilization fund, all of these programs, capital funding for public housing. All of these things are funded through the housing bond bill, even the workforce housing, which we want to change to mixed income housing. Those are the programs that really drive forward production of affordable housing homes. And that is where this bond bill, which comes every 5 years, but really drives forward a lot of affordable housing production, is such a critical tool in building new housing. And so that is going to be our priority. We are still waiting on the administration to release their draft of the bond bill. We don't have a legislative bond bill yet. How it'll move is after the administration files, it'll go through the legislative process, wherein we will have plenty opportunity to testify and make sure that it's moving forward. This year, it looks like it'll have a lot more policy than it has had in the past sessions. And so it'll be a joint effort to also push for not just the housing bond programs, but also any other policy that we want to see move forward in this session. And so it's going to be a huge effort. You will be hearing a lot from us over the next few weeks, months, and we really invite you to engage with us on the bond bill and how we can make it a comprehensive housing bill that really makes Massachusetts a place that is affordable. And as I said, as we work towards production, we also want to expand our state rental voucher programs. Massachusetts is really a leader in terms of having these rental voucher programs like MRVP, the alternative housing voucher programs for people with disabilities. And we are so glad to see many improvements happening. We are getting massive investments in these programs over the years. Not massive, but incremental. And we definitely want to make them massive. So that is where we are heading. Reducing zoning barriers for smart growth. We have a bill that will help make ADUs by right, but also have other things that will make it easier to have inclusionary zoning, to build on vacant properties and state-owned, prioritizing state-owned land for affordable homes. Those are some of the things that we really want to see move forward. As we work towards resources, we want to create a base of these forward zoning policies that will really help push growth. And one of our main legislations on fair housing to establish a statewide office of fair housing and a statewide fair housing trust fund, because we have good fair housing laws in Massachusetts, but in order for them to work, we need to have a robust infrastructure to enforce those laws. And so having a statewide office of fair housing can really be a place where throughout the state, those fair housing lanes can be paid more attention to, and there can be more enforcement mechanisms for our fair housing laws. And I know Whitney's going to talk more about that. And also when we talk about preservation, preserving our public housing stock is important, which is why one of our main asks is focused around public housing in the bond bill, but also preserving the rights of public housing residents who live in that public housing is just as important. And so as we got a huge win last year where it was made easier for public housing projects to go into redevelopment projects with public-private partnerships, as those things happen, we need to ensure that the rights of public housing residents are preserved under the new ownership, just as they had in the previous public housing ownership. So those are some of the things we are working on. These are the bills we are pushing for. They have already had a hearing under each of the committees they were in, except the bond bill. And so at this point, we are just reaching out to our legislators and the housing committee to vote them out of the committee favorably, but also looking to see if we can add these to the housing bond bill. Going forward to our budget stuff, as I said, one of our efforts is to codify Massachusetts rental voucher program, because at this point it's a $200 million program, and it is really important that it's established in a state statute and is more permanent than just being in the budget how it currently is. And so as we do that, we also want to make sure we are putting in more investments. We had asked for $250 million in the budget for MRVP. We got close to $200 million, which is a great number. We'll see. We are hoping to see new MRVP vouchers coming out, project and mobile. And we are really glad to see that the administration is moving to have small area FMRs where the rent is calculated as per the area-wide FMRs instead of the regional ones, which gives more flexibility to how the vouchers can be used. Also, we are glad to see that we've had asked for project pacing of AHVP having similar structure as MRVP. So we are addressing having units that are accessible and adaptable, and not just creating new vouchers, but also creating units that can house people with disabilities. We are happy to get closer to that ask. Public housing operating, we are glad to see increases, but we still have a long way to go in terms of what the need is. And increasing RAFT to $250 million, we are again close to $190 million. So we are glad to see many of our asks at the legislature really stepping up and getting it closer to what the need is, but we still have a long way to go. And our continued efforts for funding the statewide Office of Fair Housing. So these are some of the things we are pushing for. We are getting a lot of wins, but we also have a long way to go forward, which is where we really need your input and help in reaching out to the legislature and advocating for all of those things with us. Not to take up too much time, I'm just going to skim through the next slide, which is a list of all the funding requests. So what we had and what we received, it's just, I'm not going to go through those, but it's just if anybody wants to refer, I'm happy to share more materials on that. With that, I'm going to conclude our policy presentation and see if anybody has any questions regarding any of our specific policies. But also just to reiterate that we need all of your support and all of your advocacy to really make these things in a reality. So welcome. Please feel free to join our committees and join this effort, and happy to provide any more information.
Thank you so much to the policy team. As you can see, again, it is a team effort, and how we get this done is with your help. I'm going to continue to go through slides. Please utilize the chat if you have particular questions or notes. This is why we are here to hear from you on those particular items. I saw some of the questions in the chat. Of course, this is being recorded, and you all will have access to that. It will be shared later on our events page, in addition to some of the key takeaways from today and the slides. So I wanted to make sure that folks knew that. Just excited about our work. Of course, as many of you know, with CHAPA, we came as a result, within the civil rights movement when we were established, right? Seeing housing essential to answering some of the challenges, right? And sort of an answer to some of that solution. And so we continue to put fair housing at the forefront. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk just a little bit about, sort of that premise, right? We believe here that, everyone has the right to choose where they want to live, free from housing discrimination, right? In a home that is affordable, that is sustainable, in communities that are thriving. And so we believe that it's important to be intentional in our work in achieving this with a collective real mission. And how we do that is through some of the legislative priorities, which Abby and Matt both mentioned, as well as through our collective efforts with partnering with organizations like you all, partnering on the municipal level throughout the state, and certainly in our Fair Housing Committee work, where we work to meet throughout the year on things around best practices and policies and programming as well. Pardon me. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about some of the legislative priorities, which Abi already mentioned, but these are sort of our fair housing legislative priorities that we put at the forefront. And based off time, I'm going to try to go through these things quickly so we can make sure that we have enough time in our breakout groups to hear from you all. But again, as Abi mentioned, we have an act preventing rather, discrimination against affordable housing, our exclusionary zoning legislation, as well as what I'm excited newly that we've been working on is the state office of fair housing. What I'd add to what Abby already mentioned was that, of course, it's paired with the Fair Housing Trust Fund. And what's important about that is that it can inform and it can give resources and real resources to do special projects, to do testing, to fund organizations on the ground that are doing the real work to affirmatively further fair housing. And so, just excited about that. On the next slide, I think I do have a photo too of when we went just last month. Some of us from the Fair Housing Committee came and gave testimony, right, to the Joint Housing Committee on that particular legislation to talk about its importance. And so we would invite you to join our efforts to meet with us. If you care about fair housing, we invite you to join us, and we'll share links with you sort of how to join that committee and that ongoing effort. And so on the next slide, of course, we are tackling this issue of fair housing from various perspectives, right? Many communities are looking at racially restrictive covenants. They're talking deeply about what does it mean for a community to be open and welcoming. They're looking to revitalize and enhance their local fair housing committees and starting to document the local history of housing discrimination so that they can begin to make the case for solutions-based remedy and redress, right? And certainly in our coalition building work, which Monica will be talking a little bit about within our municipal engagement initiative, putting fair housing at the forefront of organized coalitions and support of more affordable housing locally, where we know housing makes or breaks, is certainly important. And so these are some of the things that folks are grappling with. We'd love to hear in the breakout session some of what you are working on, right? Are you looking at changing stipulations around your local preference? Are you looking to diversify your housing stock to get at more diversity for folks who live in the community? Looking to hear what things you're working on, and certainly I invite you again to join our committee work, to contact me to talk with us further around the work you're doing to put fair housing at the forefront. Because we know that all of this happened by design. And so to undo the nuances that we see, it must be intentional and by design as well. And so lastly, I will sort of again implore you to support and contact your legislators on these on all of these policies, but particularly the fair housing piece as well. Join our committees. We have our Confronting the History of Housing Discrimination. We do alongside our partners, the Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action. Folks are joining us today. Hi, Cindy and others. And so we just invite you to engage with us further in your work and revitalize those local fair housing committees, do that real work and share with us as well so that we can uplift it also. So I'll segue to just introduce our Municipal Engagement Associate, Monica Keel, and she will be talking a bit about what we've been up to in the Municipal Engagement Initiative program. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you, Whitney. Hello again. I'll reintroduce myself for a second. My name is Monica Keel. I am the Municipal Engagement Program Associate here at CHAPA. You may have seen me at various making the case calls or working registration at some of our recent events this year. So really excited to talk more with you all about what we've been working on this year in the Municipal Engagement Initiative. First, I'll just shout out that the most important thing is about building support for affordable housing production in communities all across the Commonwealth. Community support can make or break housing development at the local level, as I'm sure you're all very aware of. But many communities have no strategy or coalition to build that local support. And that is what we try to do. We try to support those local coalitions. We do want to note that every community is very different circumstances and starting points, and we just want to support whatever the community says that they want to do. We're there to help you all with that. And this is a poster that we have created for our funders, but we wanted to share it with you all, specifically this theory of change circle on the right-hand side. In the center, we have our main goal about increasing production and improved access to affordable housing. What we try to do through that goal is change the conversation, do some of that myth busting that comes in these conversations, especially in public meetings, empower those who are most impacted. We want folks to share those personal stories. However, if they are comfortable sharing that, we want them to be at the forefront. We want to elevate pro-housing voices as well, and we see diverse, sustainable local coalitions. So some of the communities we've been working in recently, for our full communities, we have been doing our continued work in Franklin County. I know I've seen some folks from the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, so hello to you all. Our new communities that we've taken on are Needham. So if you are from Needham, feel free to send an emoji to say hi, and even Newburyport. And what's been interesting in Newburyport is that they have wanted to do a greater Newburyport coalition. So that has involved folks from Newberry, West Newberry, Amesbury, and Salisbury to do a more regional effort there. So that has been really great. We have been working in our light version of communities with Dennis and Weston. So shout out to those folks if you are here. And like I said, we love to do this continued coalition work, and I will pass it off to my colleague, Lily.
Thanks, Monica. My role here at CHAPA these days, having formerly held Monica's role, is MBTA Communities Engagement Manager. And so you can, as you can guess, my life is 3A all day. And so I will quickly talk about what 3A is and what support I'm providing, but I know for a lot of folks here, this isn't really relevant to you. So I want to focus primarily with my time today on how I talk about multifamily housing when I go into communities, because I do feel like there's some broadly applicable things there. So for anyone who needs a refresher, the MBTA Communities Act, also known as Section 3A, legalizes multifamily housing near transit as of right. And it impacts 177 MBTA communities that fall into 4 categories: rapid transit, those who have access to the red, green, blue, orange lines; commuter rail communities; and adjacent communities and small towns which share a border with a community that has a train station. Each of these communities are required to create a district with a minimum allowance of 15 units per acre by right. The zone has to be of a reasonable size. How that is determined is a little bit different community by community. You can't place age restrictions on that zoning. You need to allow for housing that's suitable for families. And if you do have a train station, a certain percentage of that district has to be within half a mile. So you can see here all the communities that fall under this law. It really stretches all the way into the central part of the state. And since January, I have been providing technical assistance to many of these communities, specifically around their community engagement efforts, because ultimately these zoning changes need to be passed municipality by municipality, and 112 of those 177 have an open town meeting form of government, which requires really intensive community engagement to be able to drive out enough people and to get these changes passed. So the technical assistance that I'm offering there's sort of 3 primary strands. I have small community cohorts. Right now I'm working with 44 communities in 7 cohorts. They've been paired based off of, sort of various comparability, regional, what type of transit they have, governance structure, et cetera. And we get together monthly to, talk through whatever challenges they're coming up across, brainstorm together. I have monthly learning sessions where we do more of a deep dive with an expert on topics that are related to 3A. So, the stuff that we all know when we talk about new housing, we're going to hear concerns about affordability, about water usage and other infrastructure, about school enrollment. So supporting folks with the knowledge in those areas as well, so they can effectively respond to those concerns. And then lastly, direct one-on-one support. So I've gone into a lot of communities to do presentations, help facilitate some of these sessions, consulting directly with planners on designing their community engagement strategies. I've created a lot of universal resources. So this is what I've been up to since our last regional meeting. And here's my little map of the communities that I'm currently working in. I think there are a few missing. I think there were maybe 40 when this map was made, but you can see that it really is spread pretty evenly across the region. But I want to focus the rest of my time today on talking about why I think it is so important that we proactively make the case for multifamily housing in all of our communities, whether you are a Section 3A community or not. Because while some opponents may frame this as some kind of punishment or mandate from the state, we really believe that 3A is truly an opportunity to create thriving communities and a sustainable regional economy. Our housing shortage is no one municipality's responsibility. It is a regional issue and it requires a regional response. But in order to prepare for these changes that are so necessary, we need to have really meaningful conversations with a wide array of stakeholders in our communities about their aspirations and their vision for the future. What do we want our community to look like in 10, 20, 30 years? Who should be able to live here, to work here, to own a business, to play here, to recreate? And when we talk about these potential zoning changes, or really any changes, we have to focus on all of the benefits that transit-oriented development has to offer. And while there are definitely sticks for noncompliance with 3A, namely the loss of access to quite a few grants and the risk of legal action from the state, our messaging always has to start with the why. And I think this is true across really any potential change that we're talking about. When I go into communities to talk about 3A, I really make sure to take the time to set the table for a productive conversation. So I go all the way back to the beginning. What is zoning to begin with? I never make the assumption that people coming into one of these meetings actually know what zoning is, because most people don't go through their daily lives knowing what zoning is. Why does it matter? How does it impact our community? I really have started to think of zoning as like the code in the matrix. It's controlling everything, but you can't see it. But underneath it is really shaping every aspect of our lives. How did our zoning become this way? Looking back at the history of zoning, what have the consequences of that restrictive zoning been? And what are the benefits of creating more housing choice? Why was Section 3A passed? What is the context and history in which this came about? It didn't appear in a vacuum. What does 15 units per acre actually look like? Again, that's something most people don't just have an inherent sense of. What could this potentially look like in your community? How does this align with recent planning processes? Looking back at recent housing production plans, master plans, or any stated town goals, how are these zoning changes going to help you further these goals you've already stated you have? And what opportunities do residents have to make their voices heard? Making sure that, yes, there are certain requirements by the state. Yes, they have created guidelines, and it's not a completely open format, but there are still a lot of places that residents can have impact and a say in what their district looks like, where it's located, additional, elements they want to include around affordability, green space, et cetera. Really uplifting the fact that there is still a lot of opportunity for people to make their voices heard. So some of the messaging that I like to relay is, of course, there are so many benefits of multifamily housing, and whether you live in it or not, multifamily housing benefits all of us, because at the end of the day, more options equals more access and greater affordability. It means that older adults can downsize and stay in their community. It means college kids can come home and rent their first apartment, maybe not move back in with their parents. It means young couples can become homeowners, start a family. Low-income families can find stability. Middle-income families have more choice, greater mobility. Small businesses can retain employees and get new customers. Grandparents can stay close to their grandchildren, and we all benefit. And specifically, the benefits of transit-oriented multifamily housing as well. It benefits our environment because every year in America, Americans take over 22 billion driving trips that are under a mile. And in the greater Boston area specifically, 1 in 5 car trips are under a mile. And that's exactly the kind of behavior that we want to see a shift away from. Because if we're building housing near transit, near schools, retail, services, et cetera, a lot of those trips could be shifted towards other modes. And I mean, can you imagine if 1 out of every 5 cars that's on the road right now was just taken away? I mean, that would create an immediate serious relief of traffic congestion. In addition to obviously cutting down on the carbon emissions significantly. Neighborhoods that are more walkable have higher home values. Households spend less money on their transportation in walkable communities. Of course, there are so many health benefits, fewer traffic deaths, reduced illness from pollution, the health of just walking more regularly as a way to get around. Equity, walkable, and transit accessible communities provide opportunities more equitably. If you can't or don't drive, you should still be able to access your daily needs, particularly for kids or older adults who might otherwise be dependent on someone to take them to these services. And children raised in walkable communities have greater upward economic mobility than kids who start in similar socioeconomic setting, but in a less walkable location. And walkable communities build social capital. It's an opportunity to interact with your neighbors, to really participate in the civic life of your community. And research has actually shown that residents who live on streets with lower traffic are more likely to know their neighbors. I can certainly say anecdotally that has definitely been my experience. I've lived in a lot of different places with a lot of different kind of settings, and that has definitely been true in my life. And also, walkable communities are positively associated with higher rates of civic engagement through voting and volunteering. So the benefits ripple out so far beyond housing. And of course, this is CHAPA, housing is our #1 priority, but I think it's important that we help folks realize the full ecosystem of the benefits that this has to offer, because creating more multifamily housing opportunity in your community doesn't just benefit the people who would live in it. It truly does benefit all of us. And I think that's the thing I really want to uplift. So lastly, if you want to get more involved in this conversation, I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with the details of the law. The state, EOHLC, they have put together a number of fact sheets that can help kind of break down some of those more technical pieces. A lot of, MAPC has also created some great fact sheets. There's a lot of resources out there. Make your voice heard at public events and hearings. I mean, I cannot overstate what a difference it makes when one of the first people to get up in a public meeting speaks in favor of these changes, it completely changes the entire tone of the conversation. And I know that it can be stressful and frightening at times, especially when you're speaking in favor of something that you know your neighbors might be opposed to, but it really does make all the difference. Writing op-eds and letters to the editor, especially in local publications. Join your community's MBTA working group or task force if they have one. A lot of them are forming them. Gathering images of existing multifamily housing in your community. There is an amazing site that's been put together by Mass Housing Partnership called Residensity. I'll drop the link in the chat after this, where you can actually look parcel by parcel at every town in the Commonwealth and find out what the use of that parcel is, what the size, the units per acre, et cetera. And I've been utilizing that to identify existing multifamily housing in these communities that meets that 15 unit per acre density, gathering images, videos, to be able to, share with your own networks, share with your neighbors, your town planners, being able to show folks this already exists. And it's actually not this scary, mysterious thing. We already have it here. Having conversations with key stakeholders, business owners, abutters, current residents of multifamily housing, teachers who can't afford to live in town, older adults looking to downsize, hearing about their perspective, learning about their concerns, and really uplifting those to your town planners, encouraging those folks to also go out to those meetings and share their perspective. If someone has a really compelling personal story, encouraging them to share that through an op-ed if they feel comfortable. And if you live in an MBTA community and are not already engaged in the conversation, you should reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Lily. And you can probably will note now there are a number of folks who want to reach out to you, who want to engage with you, and any of the questions in the chat that you're able to answer would be amazing. Of course, one of the questions that is lingering there is like, how can a non-MBTA community have something similar? We want to get into that. We want to get into the weeds. Hopefully, you guys, I didn't freeze. I'm gonna just keep talking unless someone tells me that I've frozen here. But let's get into these conversations and get into the meat of the work. We're gonna break out now into our regional breakout groups. And we want to engage with what you all are tackled with locally. And I imagine that question of like a similar type of legislation for non-MBTA communities will certainly come up as well. And so what Monica is going to do is share some of the questions in the chat for us for our shared conversation that will guide, hopefully, the discussion. I imagine you have come here already ready and primed with your things you want to share. Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing those in the chat. We're going to throw a bunch of questions at you. And we are going to hope that it will guide the conversation. No need to get to all of it. And our co-sponsors and staff will be on those breakout group calls with you to guide the conversation. And so what I'm doing now is just opening up all the rooms. Someone will give me an indicator on my staff that worked okay. What I'd hope that we do, thank you, Ron, always number one here. We'll hope that we'll do is that you'll self-select. We have not done it in advance, but self-select and join one of the rooms. We're going to have about 30 minutes or so to engage in this conversation. Please self-select into one of the breakout groups and let's get the local conversation going and flowing.